Hello everybody, on today's episode of Head vs Heart, a TVR Tuscan S with a surprise in it. Those who've been watching the channel for a while will know that I love a TVR. Every time I've had the opportunity to drive one, I've come out with a smile like a Cheshire cat. However, they're a company whose products I've always enjoyed, but never bought. Truth be told, of course, there is one simple reason many people will not buy these cars: their reputation for braking. In the case of the Tuscan, for braking in a particularly expensive way. However, that really hasn't ever put me off all that much. If anything, it's the inconvenience of not being able to get somewhere rather than the cost of fixing it that's put me off. As time goes by, I have begun to wonder maybe I should stop dithering and just get one. I did actually come very close to making the leap earlier in the year, but then the Honda broke, and that essentially took all my TVR money away from me. So today, once again, on a glorious and rather toasty British summer's day, I find myself behind the wheel of a very special car, and I'm going to talk to you about it and whether this is the kind of thing I should be buying. So, what do we have here? This is a 2001 TVR Tuscan S. What's so special about this particular example? Well, this one has had an engine rebuild by Dom at TVR Power. If you're not familiar with the TVR world, and the Tuscan in particular, up front, not that you can see it, is a Speed 6, a straight 6 designed and built by TVR themselves. A rather bold thing to do. Unfortunately, for various reasons that are far too boring to go into today, the engines didn't last all that long, and many of them required a rebuild fairly early in their life. One of the companies that gained a reputation for rebuilding them to a higher standard was TVR Power, run by a chap called Dom. And you could have your engine rebuilt to original factory specifications. These came with either a 3.6 or 4-litre version of the engine. But he can also, if the mood takes you, spice things up a little bit. And that's exactly what's happened here. Let's try the old famous JayEmm 3-point turn hill start torture test, shall we? In a TVR Tuscan S. Oh, that turning circle. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, that's really, really terrible. The throttle in these is so sensitive. The clutch takes some getting used to. I've always found the throttle so weird. It's a famously long travel throttle. You know, you really do need to get it to the floor to get everything from the engine. But it's also very, very sensitive, probably due to the fact that it's just a cable and that's how these things work. Anyway, Dom offers some options for enlarging your engine. If 4 litres wasn't already girthy enough for you, you can have more. A very popular option is its 4.3 litre conversion, but this has the 4.5. It's very spicy. And it's worked, I can tell you that. The Speed 6 was never the torquiest of engines. In the mid-range, it never really felt like it had that much gusto. You had to rev it out. But here, I haven't really even gone close to giving this full whack, but it sings. From factory, these allegedly put out some 390 horsepower in S guys at the crank. This got dynoed at 416 to the wheels. Torque is also very healthy, now about 360 odd pound-feet, 500 newton meters or so, and that's from very, very low down. This is an incredibly tractable engine. As with many a TVR, the catalytic converters in this are on holiday, but luckily this car hasn't received the full exhaust treatment. Many of them are running essentially a straight-through pipe, which leaves them sounding rather wonderful, but also very antisocial. They're too much for me. This has an ACT system on it, and the back boxes are intact. Many people sleeve them. Please stop doing that. There are, however, some odd reverbs coming through this car, but I'm just going to assume that that's normal and part of it because Ian tells me the car is working well. As it happens, he has an interesting history with TVR because way back in 1998, he went to the motor show and actually put a deposit down for one, as did his brother. In the end, he decided not to take it because of delays, potential issues with the car, so on and so forth. But his brother did get his, and he's still got it. He's had his Tuscan now for 24 years. It's got over 80,000 miles, and I'm happy to report it's actually still on its original engine. What Ian wound up buying instead was the then also fairly new Porsche Boxster. He had a second one of those, an S, and that stayed with him for about 10 years. Eventually, he did get himself into a Tuscan, a later 3.6 litre. He then moved abroad for quite a while, and when he returned, decided he had to have another Trevor. So bought this, an S. The Mark 1 was in production for the majority of the Tuscan's life. It's only really in the last year or two where they did the Mark 2 and the Mark 3, which is the full convertible hood. There are several differences between the two. The easy way to identify them is by a different design for the rear on the S, some subtle changes to the front, but the most obvious is the interior. This has the classic Tuscan dash with its air vents down here, this brass speedo that ticks and is rather wonderful. And I must say, the switchgear of a TVR is something I've always somewhat appreciated. They're so cool. The later Mark II had what's known as the wavy dash, because it's wavy, unlike this, which is fairly straight, and a different design for the dash, more conventional 2-round gauges. I actually quite like the later one, but a lot of TVR purists do not. I've actually had to just turn around in the pub car park where I started today to check with the owner that it's got enough fuel in it, because the gauge is telling me that it doesn't. Oh, one thing I forgot to do, when you put these into reverse, put them into 5th first. Oh, top tip. No traction control. Luckily it didn't pepper anybody's car. In fact, one of the famous things about TVRs is that they have, well, next to no safety aids at all. There's no ABS in this car, no traction control, no stability control, no airbags, just you and the car. Officially speaking, TVR said that none of these things were really safety aids anywhere, and their car performed much better without them. I think the truth was they simply didn't have the budget in terms of either money or time to work them into the cars, so they just left it alone. On a day like today, it's not all that bad. You're fairly confident in the car, it grips well, and it does enough go well too. In fact, let's drop it down to second, give it some beans, as we apparently do have fuel. The thing about TVRs, it's very easy to think they're just some sort of muscle car, all shout and no driver involvement. Quite the opposite. This is a beautifully interactive machine. The steering is light but delicate. The front end really darty. This car, like nearly all of them, is now running an upgraded suspension setup. It's on nitrons, which, to be honest, I can't tell you if that improves the ride quality. It's a fairly firm riding thing, but it turns in beautifully. You do develop a sense of trust with the car. I haven't got masses in it because, you know, new car to me and all that jazz, but it's talkative. So you do know that you're not asking too much of it. You do develop a confidence in the car pretty quickly. The brake pedal is one of my favorites in any car, full stop. Really, really firm. It's very race car-like, very interactive, very nice. The throttle, nice, long travel, barring that initial annoyance with it when you're standing still. Absolutely fine. Visibility is great. This car has loads and loads of space in it. 2 people can sit in here comfortably, even tall ones. Peter Wheeler, the boss of the company at the time, may have been something of a rogue, if we're going to be polite, but he was also tall, which meant that he wanted to be able to fit in his cars. If you're big, you'll get in a TVR of this era, don't you worry. The same can't be said for some of the earlier cars, and Ian did, for a short while, have a Vixen, but it had to go because he couldn't fit in it. He's not a particularly big man, but the Vixen is a particularly small car. Driven at these gentler, slower speeds, the car is still very docile, perhaps a little bit bouncy and a little bit firm, but other than that, really, really quite enjoy it. These are also, as you can probably tell, a Targa top, so it looks good roof up and also good roof down. Some cars had issues with this rear window popping out. If you didn't remove it and you had the windows down, the early ones weren't fitted very well, which meant that at 70 miles an hour, they just went down the road. Later ones did solve that, and by now it's not really an issue you have to worry about. Other common mods include things like the opening bonnet, which this doesn't have, and in fact, today, because it's so hot, we can't even get to the service hatch. So, yeah, that's not so good. I also would love to be able to dispel that myth of TVRs being terribly, terribly unreliable and expensive to maintain, but I can't with this. The previous owner was a chap very much into his engineering and tinkering. He was the person that had the rebuild done, though we believe the engine hadn't actually failed. Even so, he would have spent what I think is between £15,000 and £20,000 on getting that rebuild done. That's a lot of money. And in total, over the years, I don't know how many that he had the car, he spent 50 grand on what we should term maintenance. For a car that today is probably worth sort of 35 to 40, that is a lot, isn't it? That is an awful lot. In good news though, Ian has never had a problem with this car. And I have to say, not all TVRs are in brilliant condition. I think this is a combination of the owners that they've had and also the cars not being made to the highest of standards. But this one feels in very, very fine fettle. It was supplied by a company called Shmoo Automotive, who are fairly well known. And oh my word, that turning circle is really quite poor. Fifth, then reverse. There you go, got a Mini coming. Other reputable TVR places include James Agger, Straight 6, Hexham Horseless Carriages, and I'm sure I've forgotten many, many more. But if you are going to buy one of these cars, please, please, either buy it privately from somebody that clearly knows the car and has taken it to somewhere reputable, or buy it from one of those. It will save you money. Trust me. Another reason I should really buy a car like this is that engine. I like variety in the fleet, and I like variety not just of cars, but of engines too. So I've got four cylinders, which seems a little bit silly. 2 V12s, which is even more silly, I suspect, and 1 V8. So there's a sort of 6-cylinder hole on the driveway. I had the Z3 for a little bit, but that was always intended to go. And this is an iconic 6-cylinder. I don't just want any 6-pot. I need an iconic one. And this is certainly that. It also has the big boot, which I like and get all my stuff in, though annoyingly the roof goes on top of it, so it's not very easy to get stuff in and out of, which is a downside for me. The Tamora, close relative of this car, also has a similar problem. Though it has a half-folding roof, it's still got a Targa panel, and that sits vertically in the boot, robbing you of much of your storage space when you've got the roof down. And I'm only going to want to drive a car like this in weather where you can have the roof down. In the wet? Nah. Sorry, no. It's probably better than I give it credit for. But these are also cars that have earned their reputation. The thing I really quite fancy at the moment is a Chimera, because you see, 10 years ago, these were 15 grand. Maybe not for an S, but for a regular decent one, 15 grand. And a good TVR Griffith or Chimera was not dissimilar money. Now, Tuscan is worth double what it was, but the Griffith, an equally iconic car, not close to that. That's odd. Chimeras are available for £12,000 to £15,000. That's the amount of money it's just cost me to rebuild the engine in the Honda. It's just as well we love these things, isn't it? And I love this car. The TVR also is one of those cars, yeah, sure, it's flawed, it's got issues, not brilliantly put together, all that jazz, but I don't care. It talks to you, it loves you, you'll love it back. And I do these days, if nothing else, really appreciate cars that have a public wow factor. This has got that in spades. Everyone loves a TVR, I love a TVR. Which one should I buy though? Don't tell me Cigaris, because that's got a roof on it, and a TVR has to have the roof come off. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this short, totally unguided rant from me. Maybe there's been something useful in it, hopefully. In any case, a huge thank you to Ian for bringing his car out. Thanks to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and even if you have, make sure you press the bell icon so you'll be notified of every new video release. And I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.